Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. So some new troubling reports coming out of Michigan about the Biden campaign's on-the-ground footprint or lack thereof. We've got the perfect person to talk about that. Michael Moore is going to join us. We've also got a reporter from North Carolina. That state has actually already started voting.
Right.
So we'll hear from him about how that is going. We've got David Sirota on to talk about how private equity has just hoovered up all of the cash that banks have been lending. Awesome stuff there. But we wanted to start with the big CNN Biden town hall last night with Anderson Cooper.
Yeah, for some pretty major moments last night. I guess we'll start off with absolutely his best answer. He was actually asked about racism, about having to white privilege, which I rolled my eyes a little bit at the question. However, he answered it in absolutely the most perfect way to affect the Scranton Joe personality, as much as there might be very little on the substance side to actually back any of that up. But on the pure politics of it, you could not ask for a better moment than this from the town hall. Let's take a listen.
Do you see ways that you've benefited from white privilege?
Sure, I've benefited just because I don't have to go through what my black brothers and sisters have had to go through, number one. But number two, grow up here in Scranton. We're used to guys who look down their nose at us. We're looked at people who look at us and think that we're suckers. Look at us and they think that we're not equivalent to them. If you didn't have a college degree, you must be stupid. If, in fact, you didn't get to go to an Ivy school. Well, I tell you what bothered me, to tell you the truth. Maybe it's my Scranton roots, I don't know. But when you guys started talking on television about Biden, if he wins, will be the first person without an Ivy League degree to be elected president, I'm thinking, who the hell makes you think I have to have an Ivy League degree to be president? I really mean it.
It's an incredible moment.
Great answer. What can I say?
I have to say, too, as I was watching this, I was thinking about the difference between the way Hillary positioned herself and the way that Biden positions himself. And first of all, just as a political feat. Remember, this guy aligned himself with a credit card, comes senator from MBNA. He's done the bidding of corporate America for years and years and years. Let's be clear, NAFTA, TPP, all of that. And yet, despite that all, because of moments like this, there still is this affect and connect with blue collar, working class, middle class America that he is still able to pull off. The fact that he doesn't have an Ivy League degree and was actually looked down upon by Barack Obama, by Hillary Clinton because of that and because of his more sort of plain spoken manner, that is actually his secret weapon. And so Hillary tried to pull this stuff off last time too, talking about, being
from Illinois,
coming from Illinois and her humble all that stuff. But it was so clear that her and Bill were so desperate to be accepted by the Davos set and the global elite and through the Clinton Foundation. There was just no ability to pull that off in a reasonable way. Biden does it extraordinarily effectively here, and to turn a question about white privilege, which is a very uncomfortable question to get asked, into a story about classism and class bias, really, really very effective political moment.
Brilliant moment. Let's be honest. It was a great moment for him, and it's something, especially in the setting, Scranton and all of that. And the real issue I have with this is that the Trump campaign has made it so that they are allowing this guy who has sold out America's workers and has advocated for many of the policies which destroyed the city of Scranton, destroyed the state of Pennsylvania's working class, and Minnesota, many of these other places, to come in and affect this personality without having to pay a cost. We'll get to it later in the show about this China question, but the moment you start hitting Biden on policy, it just falls apart. Like with Jake Tapper, it literally just melts away. And it's on the Trump campaign to hit them on it every single day. And I was thinking about this too. Tapper is one of the most plugged in hosts in Washington, right? And he really understood the NAFTA and the China dynamic. I actually have very little faith that the presidential moderators, maybe other than Chris Wallace, are going to understand that. Is that it's very much going to be focused on these Russiagate or foreign interference in the election, of which there was plenty of these types of questions last night. We're not going to get the real questions that really matter here, and I think that's on Trump for not bringing it up and not forcing the conversation.
Not only that, but the Trump campaign is running a completely substance-free campaign too.
Exactly.
It really is, and we're going to talk more about this in a moment, a couple more moments later in the town hall. It really is the most substanceless election that you can imagine. It's not being fought on policy whatsoever. whatsoever. Like their plans, their vision for the country. Nobody knows what these people are actually going to do when they win office. And the election hasn't been litigated around that. So that's why when you have like a good, just sort of political moment like this, why it actually matters and how he's able to frame himself as middle-class Joe still, in spite of the long record that, of course, we all know about on this show. Also, obviously, the big issue heading into the fall is the coronavirus. This is, in most polls, obviously #1 issue for voters. And Biden had a very effective and very strong moment here talking about he had called for a face mask mandate. And he actually kind of walked back a little bit some of the things
Legally,
that he said.
they had to, yeah.
Legally, he had to say, look, I can only do it on federal government property. But he responded very strongly to Bill Barr's assertion that face mask wearing was an impingement on personal freedom. Let's take a listen to that.
What Bill Barr recently said is outrageous. That is like slavery. We're taking away freedom. I would tell you what takes away your freedom. What takes away your freedom is not being able to see your kid, not being able to go to the football game or baseball game, not being able to see your mom or dad sick in the hospital, not being able to do the things. That's what costs our freedom. And it's been the failure of this president to deal with this virus. And he knew about it.
And he had several moments like that, very strong on the coronavirus. Great answer on vaccine, too, something we've been talking about here this week. I don't trust Donald Trump, but I do trust Dr. Fauci and the scientists. And yes, I would take a vaccine. But very clearly, there was a whole section of the town hall where he really wanted to frame this as Donald Trump has not kept you safe. Bottom line, and I will, right? And calling him out in a very clear way, very effective. Like he was on it last night, very forceful and with a lot of facts and data at his disposal. And this was one of those strong moments.
I couldn't agree more. I do think, though, that underneath all of this, and again, I still think Biden's probably going to win. But if he doesn't, there are ingredients for all the loss are right there. I saw this observed on Twitter where it was talking about how Biden always does this weird thing where any other candidate would take this moment and connect it to a broader mission of 2021, a governing agenda, a new future. We're going to come out of this. Biden stays very much within the realm of the pandemic.
That's
PPE, we're going to do this. And it's like, yeah, I mean, everybody wants more PPE and everybody wants to make sure that we get out of coronavirus, but we're probably going to be out of this thing within a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Well, that's 2 more years as president. What are you going to do? The lack of addressing it in that particular way, I think, very much leaves him vulnerable to, there's no positivist message. 2/3 of his people who are voting for him are voting against Trump.
Right.
Maybe it'll work. I mean, seriously, maybe it will. Trump is a very polarizing figure. But at the same time, you just never know, which is that are people actually going to be voting more for a positive figure or not? Same thing with Trump. I mean, look, a vote for Trump is fundamentally a vote of defense against the left and against progressivism in your culture. That's really what it's all about. Especially this time around. They're not even pretense around infrastructure or walls or
No,
anything.
he gave his whole speech yesterday about 1619 Project and all that, going all in on that. I mean, but if you're betting on re-election on that, it's ridiculous.
I said this at the time. People were like, oh, sorry, I'm so excited. I was like, look, it's great. I'm all here for it. But your time is much better spent whipping votes in the Senate to pass an economic recovery bill, right?
Yeah.
That would be the most
first of all, people just want their kids to be able to go to school.
Right.
Let's just start with that, right?
I agree with you.
That's really the thing.
Right.
I mean, one of the other dynamics, and, thinking about this town hall and also the one we covered earlier this week with President Trump and ABC News, where, by the way, the questioning was much more very hostile.
Or this time around, I mean.
I actually thought, look, Anderson did not do as good a job as George Stephanopoulos. The voters both times around. I mean, the regular people always ask the best questions. Actually, Matt Iglesias pointed this out about why Americans hate the media dynamic on display at this Biden town hall. Pro-journalist wants Biden to respond to something weird that the Attorney General said. Meanwhile, citizen questioner wants Biden to explain his health care plan.
Yeah, right.
And just hearing from these voters, the pain, my God, the suffering in this country right now, the angst, the anger, the depression, the fear about the future. We're going to play for you a moment now of a healthcare worker talking about the struggle that he was facing. And I mean, an incredibly powerful moment listening to him. And then we'll play up against that some of Biden's response to that and also his response to a question on healthcare. And we'll react on the other side. Let's take a listen to those.
Right now, I do work in a cancer center in the area. I make under $15 an hour.
Oh.
During these COVID times, unfortunately, I had to open a credit card with 25% interest just to cover my groceries. I'm barely making ends meet. Received no hazard pay, no raise. I'm struggling not only mentally, but financially. I look up to you, and as a middle-class healthcare worker, do you have any plans to stand up for us healthcare workers?
All that Trump could see from Park Avenue is Wall Street. All he thinks about is the stock market and telling, we're going to do all right. Everybody owns stock. How many of you all own stock in Scranton? Now, my neighborhood in Scranton, not a whole lot of people own stock. No. And so we have to make sure that healthcare workers are paid and paid a decent wage. And $15 an hour isn't enough for a healthcare worker. The idea that healthcare is debated as whether or not it's a right or a privilege, it's an absolute right. And so we have to make sure, particularly in the moment of COVID, that any costs relating to COVID are in fact free.
Yeah, I mean, you could say, this is what drives me crazy. I think his answers are great on both of them, but it's like when that healthcare worker is talking about how he got loaded up on a credit card with 25% interest. Who made that possible? It was Joe Biden who stripped bankruptcy protection from millions, and then senator from MBNA in the credit card industry, the credit card state, that's what they call Delaware. It's like, and look, I don't blame the guy. You know, it's not his job to know that or whatever. I'm more just, he affects this working class personality. Who made these things possible? Who made it so that, you know, you could be strung out and basically, you know, destroyed economically, not making that? Or has Joe Biden put forward an economic recovery plan to make sure that healthcare workers are going to get hazard pay? No. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, I could go all the way down the list about materially how this man's life has been systematically destroyed by our current economic system. And there's nothing really put forward by the Biden team to actually do anything about it. I mean, on the healthcare is a right thing. I immediately thought of you because I was like, okay, well, if you think that, you know, there's this policy.
And that,
you know.
that is the thing. I mean, watching that man with his pain and his vulnerability stand. I mean, this is a healthcare worker, like somebody on the front lines.
Yeah.
It really makes me emotional. Like, he's willing to put his struggle so front and center. And yes, on the politics and the signaling, Joe is very good and a million times better at empathy than President Trump, who just like doesn't have that.
Yeah.
Like, he just doesn't have it in him whatsoever. But my God, you're going to go out there and say healthcare is a right and not a privilege. And then what do you have to back it up? I mean, even the plan that he has offered, which is a public option and an expansion of Obamacare, which would be better than nothing, let's be clear. Even that, they're now backing off of. Democrats are now saying, well, it's going to be hard and Republicans are so mean and it's so complicated. It's like, Jesus Christ, people are struggling and nothing is, I mean, whichever one of these candidates gets elected. Look, I think Joe Biden will bring some like calm at least. I think we're more likely as a country to survive if Joe Biden gets elected president. I think he'll be somewhat better on climate change. But the fundamental reality for that man and so many of the voters that we heard from this week in their anger and their pain and like, dear God, somebody see us and do something. Nobody's addressing it.
No, they're not. And it's depressing, but it is the state of where we are.
Coming up on Rising, investors are seeking debt that in turn can provide them with a huge payday. Friend of the show, David Sirota, explains how when Rising returns.